All righty, guys. Glad to have you here today, talking about from contract to close. Getting a contract by itself is exciting, but what's even more exciting is getting to the finish line, right? And there's a lot of stuff that we have to do to get from when we get under contract to getting to the closing table. And the good news is none of it is particularly hard. None of it is particularly time consuming, not like putting somebody in your car or having them follow you and go look at 15 houses and writing up 4 offers and dealing with all that. But there is a lot. And so we want to make sure you guys keep tabs on everything that we have to do to get to the finish line, because we've invested all this time to get under contract. The last thing we want to do is have that deal fall apart if it shouldn't. Okay. And what I mean by that is sometimes we find out after inspection it's not the right house. We want those deals to fall apart, right? But we don't want it to be because we forgot to do something or we've got to get somebody to do something. So we're going to walk through the process today, and something we're doing a little different today than the way we normally talk about it is we're going to talk about both sides at the same time. Here's what the buyer's agent needs to be doing. Here's what the seller agents need to be doing. So we're going to be looking at it on a fixed timeline. But keep in mind as we go through this, you're typically just going to be on one side or the other, right? I only need to take care of the stuff for the buyer, or I just need to take care of the stuff for the seller. But I want you to know what the other side should be doing too, so that when you're on the other side, you're able to handle that. Does that sound like a good agenda for today?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. All right. So start out, we are under contract. We have a binding agreement, okay? And as soon as that binding agreement takes place, we're now on a clock. We've got timelines that are set up in our contract that we have to comply with. We've got, when does our earnest money need to be in? When does our due diligence end? When's our closing take place? How long do we have to get them approved for their loan? How long do we have to get the appraisal done? And we don't want to miss any of those timelines. So we don't get to take a break, okay? As soon as we go under contract, there's immediately things that we need to start doing that day, okay? And the thing that I want you to know first is it's not your job to do everything, okay? But it is your job to make sure everything is done. There's things that the lender needs to do. You're not going to do them, but you have to make sure the lender does it. There's things the attorney needs to do. You don't have to do it. You have to make sure it gets done. There's things you need to do as an agent. There's things that the other agent needs to do. There's things the buyer needs to do, seller needs to do. It's all your responsibility, okay? So nothing should ever come up and you say out of your mouth, well, I thought the other agent was going to take care of that, okay? It was your job to make sure that they took care of it, okay? Didn't have to do the work, but you had to make sure it got taken care of. So we do have to pay attention to both sides at the same time. So our basic timeline, and just talking in big increments of what we have to deal with from the time we get under contract until we get to the closing table. And understand there can be some overlap in these different sections, but it's easy to think of them as segments. The first thing that we're going to have to deal with is due diligence and inspection. Okay. We're going to have to deal with the appraisal. We have certain pre-closing activities. We have our closing, and we have certain post-closing activities. Okay. And we're going to break each of these up and go through and talk about each one of these individually and what are the different things we have to do in each of those sections. Okay. So we talk about having to make sure everybody does their job. Well, I want to make sure you're clear on who the big players are in the deal. And so we've already mentioned them. The broker, okay? There's certain things I have to do to make sure I stay compliant with the broker. These are things that you have to do to make sure you keep your license protected, and we keep the broker's license protected, okay? We don't want to have to write checks, and we don't want to have to turn our license in, okay? So we want to make sure we're doing all the things we have to for the broker. There's certain things the lender has to do, and even the lender has timelines, and we need to make sure that they're hitting them. And if there's going to be a problem or an issue, we know about it as early as possible. Okay? Certain things the attorney has to do, and certain things we have to do for the attorney. Okay, so we need to be in good communication with them. The buyer and the seller, whichever one is your client, you don't have to worry about who the party is on the other side. But whichever side you're on, there's things you're going to want to do for your buyer. There's things you're going to want to do for your seller to make sure they're comfortable moving through this transaction. Because if you guys didn't know it already, buying or selling a house is a little bit stressful. Okay, and so keeping them calm, keeping them engaged, keeping them informed is going to be really important as we move through the process. And then lastly, there's things you're going to want to do for you. Okay, and we're going to hit those as we're going through. That's the framework that I want you guys always, once you're under contract, you ought to be asking yourself, is there anything the broker needs right now? Is there anything the lender needs right now? Is there anything the attorney needs? Is there anything I should be doing for my client? Is there an opportunity here for me to either set myself apart and provide an exceptional service, an opportunity for me to market myself, or an opportunity for me to get a referral? Okay, those are the things we need to be thinking about constantly as we're going through. So let's break this down and look at the different sections. So immediately we're under contract. When does due diligence start? That moment, okay? If there's a due diligence. Not always going to be a due diligence, okay? We've seen that in the last year. There's some contracts that don't have a due diligence, but are there still things we're going to have to do immediately after we go under contract? And does the buyer still have the opportunity to do an inspection if there's no due diligence?
Yes.
Yes. Yes to both of those. There are things we have to do immediately, and they still have the opportunity to do an inspection. They just can't terminate without there being consequences. Okay? If they do an inspection, they don't like what they find, they terminate, they're going to lose their earnest money. But would it be better to lose $2,000 of earnest money or to buy a crappy house that's a bad investment? I'd rather lose the $2,000, okay? So understand, your contract gives you the right, even if there's no due diligence, an opportunity to do inspections. So looking at the different things we're gonna need to do, immediately after we have the contract, we need to get that full contract to everybody, okay? The broker is the first on that list. We need a copy of the contract. We need to get that loaded into Command and submitted to the broker. Okay, that's not us being difficult. That is us trying to help you, and protect your client. You want us to inspect your contract and make sure you didn't miss a signature, miss a document that needs to be there. Because if there's a problem with the contract and we find out that buyer and seller don't agree, they're not happy moving forward, and we don't have a signature, maybe we don't have a valid contract. Maybe the wrong person then is going to be entitled to get the earnest money. Okay, don't want that to happen, especially if it's other party. We need to get the full contract to the lender. Why is it so important to get the full contract to the lender?
So they can start underwriting.
So they can start underwriting. They won't do anything. They're going to do the pre-qualification, and then they stop until there's a property. Okay, they're not going to do anything more until they have a full contract, because they don't want to waste a lot of time and effort and energy if there's not a real possibility of there being a sale. Their signal that there's the possibility of being a sale is a contract. And then we need to get a full copy of the contract to the attorney. Why does the attorney need a full copy of the contract? Well, they've got to do the title research, and they're not going to start the title research until we know what property we need to research the title on. Okay, and we can't close without clear and marketable title. And especially over the last year and a half, the timeline to do a title search has gotten longer. And we may go back to that. Right now, things are kind of okay, but there were some courts that you had to set an appointment to go inspect records. And they limited the number of people that could be there. So title searches were taking 3 times as long as they normally did. Okay, so we want them in action as early as possible. And if there's gonna be a problem, if there's gonna be a title problem, if there's gonna be a financing problem, if there's gonna be a compliance problem, when do we wanna know about it?
As early as possible.
As early as possible. If you don't get it to everyone, you're not gonna find out about it till later, and it may be too late to fix it. Okay, next thing that we need to do is complete the commissions tab and update your database. Okay, and it's 2 separate things, but where we're working in command, it's easy to take care of them at the same time. The commissions tab, we want you to have that completed within 48 hours of having your due diligence done. And the reason is when you submit a contract to compliance, our compliance department sees it and they're going to look at your document. That's all that they're doing. Okay. When you complete the commissions tab, you send it to our accounting department. Our accounting department then you start showing up in all our reports, so we can start watching and making sure that everything's moving the way that it's supposed to. If you're in the coaching program, I now know that you have a contract, and I can follow up with you and check up and make sure things are going smoothly. And then lastly, if we're the holder of the earnest money, we need to know that we're the holder of the earnest money. And it's our accounting department that tracks that. And so we can't do our duty in the contract, because remember, we as the broker, we signed it, right? When you put your signature on it, that's the broker signing it, saying, we're going to comply with the contract. Well, part of our job as the holder of earnest money is to notify all parties if the earnest money is not turned in. Okay. Well, if you didn't do a commissions tab, we don't know we're supposed to have earnest money yet. Okay. So we don't know to notify anybody if it doesn't show up. And if you didn't turn it into the broker and do your commissions tab, and we don't notify everybody the earnest money's not in, and the deal falls apart, and there's no earnest money to give to the other side, who do you think they're going to want to pay it? You. We don't want you guys paying for things like that. So understand, when we ask you to do this, we're doing it to protect you. Update your database. Okay, I'm under contract now with a client. I may want them on a different smart plan. Okay, kind of funny for me when we're under contract for me to send them an email that says, hey, thinking about buying or selling a home, give me a call. Okay, so take them off those smart plans so they're not getting that information while you're in a transaction. Update the Georgia MLS and FMLS. You only have to do this if you're on the listing side. Okay, you probably want the phone calls to stop. Okay, might not, but you need to. Our contracts with Georgia MLS and FMLS say that we will update any changes in status within 1 business day. Okay, so we want your guys' help in keeping us compliant with our contracts with Georgia MLS and FMLS. So when your property goes under contract, go change the status in Georgia MLS and FMLS to under contract or pending, depending on which one it is. Add your critical dates to the calendar. Like we talked about, we're under timelines at this point. So on your calendar, put on your calendar when due diligence ends. Put on your calendar when financing contingency ends, when appraisal contingency ends, when the contract is supposed to close. Okay, and any other timelines that are in there. If there was a sale or lease of buyer's property contingency or a special stipulation that had a time limit on it, put that in your calendar so you don't overlook that. A lot of agents use a big whiteboard like this instead of putting it on their calendar, and they'll list their deals, and they've got columns for this ends on this, and they'll write the dates in there. Either of those are fine. You just want it someplace front and center so that you don't wake up one day and go, holy cow, due diligence ended yesterday. Okay. And it may not seem like a big deal now when you've got one contract, but when you're working 5 or 6 or 7 contracts, that all starts to become a jumble. Okay. So make sure we're paying attention. Compliance is going to want you to get completed a few other forms, and this is a good time. You may as well do it. That's the instructions to closing attorney, which says, here's the commissions that are being paid. Here's the total commission the seller's paying. Here's how much of that commission the listing brokerage is selling with the buyer's brokerage. Okay. Get that form done, get that turned in. That will keep compliance happy and off your back. Okay. If the property was our listing, we need to do an FMLS 117. Okay. We don't submit that to FMLS, just put it in command and let it live there. Okay. And whether we're on the listing or the selling side, we need to do the 118 if the property was in FMLS. Okay. So if we were listing it, it's definitely an FMLS, do the 118. If we're the buyer's agent, go double check FMLS. And if it's there, do the 118. If it's not, don't have to do the 118. But just know when you submit your stuff to compliance, they're going to come back immediately and say, you're missing these documents. So go ahead and do them now and turn them in. Make sure the earnest money makes it to the holder. Okay. If it's your client, you're representing the buyer, it's your job to make sure to get the earnest money to the holder. Okay. So if you've got to go pick up a check, if you've got to set up an earnest request, if we're the holder, if you've got to get wiring instructions from the closing attorney or get the closing attorney to send wiring instructions to the client, you need to make sure the earnest money gets there. If you're on the listing side, okay, remember that what earnest money is liquidated damages to the seller if the buyer defaults. If the buyer defaults and there's been no earnest money turned in, how easy is it for your seller to collect? Not very at all. You're going to have to go to court and you're going to have to sue for it. Okay. Are they going to be happy about that? No. So make sure the other side, make sure you're following up with whoever the holder is, be it the other broker or the closing attorney, to make sure that earnest money has been turned in so your seller is protected if the buyer defaults. Okay. Again, it's not your job to get the earnest money, but it is your job to make sure the earnest money gets where it's supposed to. Continuing still in the due diligence and inspection period, actually, why did one of them not show up? Wow, okay. We missed a line. So that should say very first thing is schedule the inspection. I don't know why that didn't pop up. It was on my computer. So schedule the inspection, okay? And we may be 2 or 3 days from being able to get an inspector there. We need to do this immediately, especially in today's market when we've got really short due diligences, okay? There used to be a time where 7 days of due diligence or 10 days of due diligence was pretty normal. Now it's often 4, 5, 6 days, okay? But when it was 10 days, if we waited and ordered the inspection tomorrow, no big deal. We had plenty of time. Today, we wait till tomorrow and your inspector can get there for 2 days. Well, now we've only got 1 day to review the inspection report, do anything extra we need to, and negotiate an amendment to address concerns. That's super tight. So as soon as you know you've got a binding a contract, get that inspection scheduled so that we get that report back, okay? Then what we're gonna wanna do is review that inspection report and figure out, is there anything in it's a problem? Do we need to do any additional inspections? Do we need to get any quotes? And while we're in due diligence, this is our time to do whatever inspections we need to do. And that includes the community covenants and restrictions. You know, get a copy of those, look those over. If there's a survey, or if we find we need a survey, or if there's other testing that we need to have done, your inspection report's gonna tell you some things, you know, like the roof appears to have some issues, recommend having a roofing specialist take a look at it. Well, I'm gonna have to schedule that. I'm gonna have to get a roofing contractor out there to take a look at it. If we think we may have found mold, you know, we may wanna have mold tests done, okay? Other testing that we may do, you know, this may be a land purchase and maybe we need a percolation test to make sure it's gonna accommodate a septic system. Just remember, due diligence is your timeline for your buyer to do whatever they need to do to be confident in knowing they want to move forward. And if there's an issue, if there's something that's going to keep them from moving forward, well, then we either need to terminate or we need to negotiate an adjustment to the contract, okay? We're going to negotiate repairs that need to take place, or a change in price, or a change in seller's contributions to closing. And all of this that we've just done, talked about, needs to be done before due diligence is over, okay? If we need more time, understand we may have another amendment. So let's say we had 4 days of due diligence, and we had our inspector out there and he came back and he's like, gosh, I don't know about the AC system. I recommend that you have it inspected by a specialist. Well, we're now 3 days in, 4 days in, due diligence ends tomorrow night or tonight. I may need to extend due diligence, okay, and see if the other side will allow me some additional time so that I can get the information I need to figure out what needs to go on my amendment to address concerns, okay? But that amendment to address concerns has to be finalized before due diligence is over. Any questions about that so far? Okay. So we get that negotiated, we get everybody to sign that. Next thing we need to do is any amendments, we need to get them to all parties, okay? So that's the broker, that's the lender, and that's the closing attorney, okay? All of us need to see the whole contract. And of those three, they're all important. So please don't misconstrue what I'm about to say. But one of them is more important than the others, and that's the mortgage company, the finance company. You never want to ever miss sending them a document, because if they don't have the whole contract, you could be accused of mortgage fraud, that you are hiding information from the lender just to get the loan to go through. And you don't want to, those are criminal charges. You don't ever want to face that, okay? So now that it's through due diligence, we've negotiated, everything's good, we're happily moving forward. Now the next big hurdle for us to cross is going to be the appraisal, okay? When does the appraisal get ordered? I've asked this before in other classes.
When the buyer pays for it.
When the buyer pays for it. Thank you, LaToya. That is exactly right. And the reason we put this after due diligence is I don't want my buyer paying for the appraisal until I know we're ready to move forward with the house. We needed to finish the inspection. We needed to finish the amendment to address concerns. The buyer's now happy. They like the house. They like the deal we have. Now it's okay for them to spend that $400 or $500 on the appraisal, okay? So I want to get that scheduled. I want to let the lender know, because the lender who's going to order it, that we want to get that ordered. And then they will collect the money from the buyer to make it happen. Which means I also need to make sure the buyer knows that it won't get ordered until they paid for it. And when do they need to pay for it? Today. Yeah. That can't wait, because we're on a timetable. Okay. And again, in today's competitive market, what have we seen happen to our timelines for appraisals? They've gotten shorter. Yeah. So it's taking longer to get the appraisal done, and the amount of time we have to get it done has gotten shorter. Okay. So it's important that we're very intentional about getting that done as quickly as possible. We want to confirm the appraisal is complete. Okay.
Trey,
Yeah.
so as the agent, do we tell the lender that we're ready to order the appraisal, or does the buyer do that?
Well, it can be either, but it's my job to make sure that it got done. Right? Back to that second slide.
Right.
So if I don't have that conversation and I don't have follow-up conversations, I don't know that it happened. So I may tell my buyer, and my buyer says, no, great, I'll get that done. And then what happens? Life. And 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 days go by, and then they pay for it, and now we're behind schedule. Okay.
Gotcha.
And they've lost their appraisal protection. So I want to tell the lender, hey, we need to order this. Follow with the buyer. I'm going to talk to the buyer, say the lender's going to be calling you for you to pay for the appraisal to get that ordered. You know, as soon as that comes in, I want it ordered. And then I'm calling the lender back, and I'm making sure that they got the payment from the buyer, and that they've actually placed the order. Okay. Because just because the buyer paid for it, okay, that's what they were supposed to, they did their part. Do I know that the appraiser or the lender actually placed the order? No, I need to follow up with them, make sure they place the order. And the buyer's gonna kind of be in the dark for a little bit, and you as the buyer's agent is gonna be in the dark a little bit, because who is the appraiser going to call to schedule the appraisal? The listing agent, right? Because they don't have the seller's information. They need to get into the seller's house. Right. So the listing agent is going to let them in. So the appraiser is going to call the listing agent. Does the listing agent think to call you and tell you, hey, just wanted to let you know, because I'm a really great agent, I want to have a good relationship with you, that the appraisal is scheduled for Thursday? Probably not. They should, and I encourage you guys to be that agent, okay, and let the other side know what's going on so they don't worry. But you need to follow up then after it's been ordered. You know, follow up with the other agent, say, hey, want to let you know the appraisal's been ordered. You should be hearing from them in the next few days to get that scheduled. You know, will you let me know when it's scheduled? And then if I don't hear from them for a few days, what am I doing? I'm calling them back and saying, hey, has the appraiser reached out to you about getting the appraisal scheduled? And if they haven't, who am I calling? The lender, to find out, hey, the listing agent hasn't heard from the appraiser yet. What's going on? Okay, again, it's not my job to do the appraisal. It's not my job to order the appraisal. It is my job to make sure it gets done. Okay, so once I know the appraisal is done, I want to confirm it's complete, and I want to know what the results were. Okay, and the only 2 results I care about are it's good, okay, meaning it appraised for our contract price or higher, or it's not. And if it's not, I need to know everything. I need a copy of the appraisal. I need everything. And the lender, if I'm on the buyer side, should be reaching out to me and saying, hey, we got the appraisal back. The appraisal came in low. I'm going to send a copy of it over to you. Okay. But I don't like to ever be in a position where I'm waiting on them. I'm in constant communication with my lenders and my attorneys, making sure that we're on my timeline. Okay. And if I'm the seller, I want to make sure that the appraisal came in good. Because when the appraisal's done, who are they going to send the appraisal to? The buyer, buyer's agent, lender. Seller doesn't see it. I'm the listing agent. I'm sitting there wondering, have we gotten the appraisal back yet? Is there a problem or is there not a problem? Okay. Hoping there's not a problem, but I need to follow up. I kind of, and with some experience, you guys will get a really good sense of how long it should be. I know the appraisal was scheduled for Thursday, might get the appraisal back Friday night, probably going to come in over the weekend. If I haven't heard from anybody on Monday, man, I'm making that phone call, okay? Because I should have it at that point. If the appraisal came in low, okay, I don't care which side of the transaction I'm on, I want to review the appraisal and make sure that it's accurate, okay? Because contrary to popular belief, appraisers are actually people, and they do make mistakes, okay? So they're not demons. They're not out to wreck your deal. They've got a really challenging job, especially in a fast-moving, fast-changing market like we have today. So if we've got an appraisal that's an issue, a low appraisal, I want to make sure the information on that is the best information that's on there. For my buyer, it's important that I review it because they probably don't have the money to pay the difference, and they were prepared to pay the contract price. Okay, so if it takes me getting that appraisal raised in order for us to get to the closing table, I'm all on board to do that. Okay, or I'm going to have to negotiate a lower price. If I'm on the listing side, I want my seller to get as much money as possible. I want to make sure if the appraisal came in low, there wasn't something that was overlooked or a problem. And I've seen appraisals and have contested appraisals where the appraiser completely left the basement off of a property. They used bad comps, that there was information that was better matches for our property, it was closer to our property, that should have been used in lieu of the properties they used. So go back and watch my video on understanding appraisals and challenging appraisals if you ever find yourself in that situation. I'll give you some really good guidance on how to do that. But hopefully the appraisal came in good. If it didn't, we need to negotiate an amendment to sales price, okay? Where both sides agree that we're going to reduce the contract price to the appraised value or something closer to it. Once we have that new amendment, what do we need to do with it? Send it to everyone. Yep, all parties need it, broker, attorney, and lender. Okay. Then we kind of move into the pre-close. And this is what I was saying, going back to this last one, from the time we schedule the appraisal or order the appraisal to when we get the appraisal, that might be 10, 12 days between that, okay? Really hard just to sit around and twiddle our thumbs for 10 to 12 days. So there may be some of the stuff that's under pre-closing that we can do during that same time period, especially if we've got a really short contract close period. But some of the things that we need to do in getting ready for closing is the attorney has an information sheet that they need from the buyer, and they have an information sheet they need from the seller. And every attorney has their own documents, but this is them telling you, hey, I need to know your client's correct spelling of their name. I need to know their tax status. I need to know their, social security number. I need to know if they're planning on being at closing or we're going to do a mail away. So it reads like a checklist. It's nothing that they have to sign. Some of them do have a document that they sign agreeing that they will cooperate with certain things and give them permission to get payoffs from the lenders and things like that. But a lot of times there are no signatures on these. But we still need to get it done and back to the attorney. It's information they need for the closing, okay? But that sheet's gonna come from the attorney, and you're not the one that fills it out, your client fills it out, you just have to make sure it gets filled out and gets back to the attorney. We need to follow up with the attorney and the lender, okay? Want to know from the lender, are we on track? You know, has the buyer gotten everything to you? Do we foresee any problems with us making our closing on time? And we need to go ahead at this point and follow up with the attorney and get the closing scheduled, okay? We sent them a contract that says, here's our closing date, but do we always close on the date on the contract? Now, frequently there's delays and it's gonna have to be extended. Sometimes we're gonna be closing early, okay? Talk to the lender says, hey, we're good to go. We can close in as little as 5 days now, okay? Well, buyer and seller may want to move that timeline up. At this point, we should have a pretty good indication whether we're gonna close on schedule, if it's gonna be delayed, or we're gonna be able to close early. Okay, so we want to get on their calendar. The lender doesn't set aside space for you. They don't reserve the conference room and make sure there's an attorney there until you actually schedule a time room. Okay, and it's typically going to be one of the two agents that sets the time for the closing. I prefer that to be me. Okay, so I want to do this before the other agent does it. So I get to pick a time that works with my schedule. And to a lesser extent for my client's schedule, okay? They're closing, they're making the biggest purchase of their life. Can they be a little flexible with their time? My client, yeah, okay? Me, I'm busy. I've got certain things I need to do every day. This is just another day for me at work, okay? So I need that closing to fit into my schedule, okay? That's my mindset around it. Yours may be a little bit different, and if you want to defer the decision of when you want closing to your client, you guys are welcome to do that, okay? But I just encourage you to, even now, set a really high value on your time and start thinking that way. Confirm the seller has finished any repairs that needed to be completed, okay, from either the contract or the amendment to address concerns. I want to know if we're on track, okay? We're still 15 days, 10 days, 7 days from closing at this point, moving through our timeline. I want to know, are the repairs already done? Are they on schedule to be done, or are there potential issues, okay? And if there was a termite letter that needed to be done and needed to be issued, and that could have been something that was put in the contract, or if it's a VA loan, VA loans require the seller to provide an official Georgia wood infestation report, okay? So we want to make sure that that's in there. We want to request a DA, and if needed, the earnest money check, okay? And those are the same process, okay? We like for you guys to get paid at the closing table. And a DA is a disbursement authorization. That is a document that's created and signed by the broker that tells the attorney, instead of giving us one check made out to the broker, we want this list of checks. We want one made out to Keller Williams. We want one made out to our agent. We want one made out to the coaching program. We want one made out to FMLS. We tell them how we want the money split up, okay? Well, the DA has a specific process, okay? One, before you can request the DA, your opportunity has to have been approved by compliance. Two, your commissions tab has to be completed and approved by the accounting department, okay? If those two things aren't done, we won't give you the DA. We're gonna make you do those things before we pay you, okay? And understand, we want to pay you. We wanna pay you at the closing table. It is actually less work for us as an office for you to get paid at the closing table and to be able to walk away from closing with your check than it is for you to bring it back here and us have to write the list of checks, okay? So we like when you guys do DAs, One, because we'd love for you to get paid as early as possible. Two, it's less work for us, okay? And the other reason for submitting the DA is it forces us to look at the opportunity and the commissions and the closing day and figure out, do we need to give you an earnest money check to take the closing? Okay, so the thing to understand is there are gonna be times where the earnest money check, if we're holding it, needs to go back to the closing table in order for it to close. And I'll give you guys an example. Let's say that we were buying a property, we're working with a buyer, and we were buying a property for $300,000. Okay, what's the commission on $300,000? $9,000 would be our commission. Okay, what is the broker split? Okay, what does Keller Williams Atlanta Partners get out of that? 30%. Okay, so our 30%, what we make is $2,700. Okay, well, there was $5,000 in earnest money. Okay, in this case, when all the smoke clears, closings happened, we're supposed to have $2,700. Well, we're holding $5,000. Okay, if we don't send money back to the closing table when you go, there's not enough money to close the deal because we're holding $2,300 of money that's supposed to go toward the purchase. Okay, so we need to know before you're closing to cut that check and give you that check for you to take with you to closing. Okay, conversely, if the earnest money were just $2,000, okay, you don't have to get a check. Okay, what the attorney will do is we're owed $2,700. They'll just give us a check for $700 is what we get paid at the closing table. And then the $2,000 we have and the $700 they gave us balances the books. Okay, does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So, and the way we know to look and figure out, do you need a check or not a check, is you requesting a DA. Okay. We need to confirm the wiring instructions have been sent. Okay. So if we're on the buyer side, the buyer is most likely having to bring money to the closing table for their closing costs and their down payment. We need to make sure that the wiring instructions have been sent to them. We don't send it. We want the attorney to send it to them directly, but we need to make sure the attorney has done that, and we need to make sure that the buyer has received it. If there's a home warranty that needs to be ordered, and this could be either the seller, the listing agent, ordering the home warranty because the contract said that the seller could provide a home warranty, but more than likely it is the buyer's agent that would be ordering a home warranty because the seller agreed to pay a certain cost toward a home warranty, or we just talked to our buyer about the importance of a home warranty so they don't have any unexpected repairs in their first year, and the buyer is going to be paying for it at the closing table. In either case, we as the buyer's agent, we're going to order it, and we're going to have the invoice for it sent to the attorney, or we're going to send it to the attorney so that it gets paid for at the closing. Everybody with me? All right. Next one, remind the buyer to schedule the utilities. Okay. And conversely, you might want to remind your sellers, don't turn off the utilities until after close. Okay. Because when the buyer goes to do their final inspection, if the utilities are off, they can't do their final inspection, and closing is going to be delayed. Okay, but you also don't want your buyer to move in today and wake up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning to find their water and their power has been turned off, because they start early in the morning with turning utilities off. So go ahead and get those scheduled. And then if the closing date shifts, remind them that they may need to call back and reschedule those, okay? Especially your sellers, because they'll plan to have utilities turned off on Wednesday because closing was on Tuesday and closing got moved till Friday. And then their utilities get turned off on Wednesday when they had them scheduled. You try and do your final walkthrough on Thursday and we're now delaying closing. Okay, so just make sure there's good communication around that. Wow, I do not know what just happened there. Go back, let's find where I was. Button one time and it jumped through everything. All right. Sticking with the pre-close, we're now in that week or so before closing. We do want to schedule the final walkthrough. And I encourage you guys to consider 2 walkthroughs, okay? And the reason I say that is I want to go make sure the house is in the condition we expect it to be in before we go to the closing table. I want to do it a few days ahead of time first to see if there's any potential problems, so that if there is a problem, we've got time to get it fixed, okay? And then I want to do it as close to closing as I possibly can, okay? Including the day of, to make sure that everything is good before my buyer goes and signs on the dotted line, okay? So for me, it's usually one of those is just me, one of those is me and my buyer, okay? So me and my buyer go 3 days before, everything looks great, no problems. I'll swing by the morning of closing just to make sure everything looked like it did 3 days ago, okay? Or I'll go 3 days ahead of time, look, make sure there's no problems, and if there's not, then plan to bring my buyer back the morning of closing just so they sign off and are happy with what they find as well, okay? Does that make sense? And I can't emphasize enough how important it is that you do that final walkthrough as close to closing as possible. Twice in my career, I've had major surprises the morning of closing. One of those, we showed up to the property. Well, actually, I was by myself. I showed up to the property, and the property had been broken into the night before, and all the brand new appliances had been stolen, and the back door busted in. Okay. Another time I showed up the morning of closing, and there was water running out the front door from a busted pipe overnight, and the whole first floor had an inch of water. Okay. So if we had gone to closing without that walkthrough, whose problem would those have been? The buyers, okay? Remember, in Georgia, it's buyer beware. You are buying the property as is, whereas. And if they sign on that dotted line, any issue with the property is now that buyer's problem, okay? So do that walkthrough as close to as you can. 3 days prior to closing, and I encourage you start this 4 days prior to closing, make sure the CD is signed. The CD is the closing disclosure. This is the document from the lender that says, here's the terms of your loan, okay? Here's the purchase price, here's the interest rate, here's what your payment's gonna be. This is a federal requirement based on the TRID laws, okay? And don't ask me to tell you what TRID stands for because I don't remember. But federal law says that they have to know what's in the loan at least 3 days prior to closing, okay? So that CD is gonna have to be signed, and if it's not, legally we cannot close, okay? So that's 3 days before that has to be done. And that's just on the buyer side, okay? And I don't care if I'm the buyer's agent or the seller's agent, I want to know, did it get signed? Because if it didn't, we're not closing. Okay, so I'm following up with a lender from both sides to make sure that was done. Okay, if I'm going to be doing a closing gift, I don't want to wait till the morning of, the night before, a few days before if I haven't done it already. That's my reminder on my checklist that I need to go ahead and get a closing gift put together. The day before is usually when the settlement statement's going to be available. Okay, there may be some occasions in a rush to close situation where we can't get our hands on the settlement statement till the morning of. The settlement statement is much like the CD. Okay, it's a breakdown of how money is changing hands at the closing table. Okay, the difference between the CD and the settlement statement, the CD just shows the numbers on the buyer side of the transaction. The settlement statement shows the numbers on both sides of the transaction. And I don't care which side of the transaction I'm on, I want to see the settlement statement. Because in Georgia, who typically pays commissions? The seller, okay? So if I'm on the buyer side, the only way I know that my commission is on the settlement statement is if I look at the settlement statement, okay? So I want to look at it for selfish reasons because I like to get paid. But then I also want to review that with my client and make sure that they understand what's on there because that's what they're going to be signing at the closing table. Okay. And I would rather have questions the night before or the morning of than at the closing table. Okay. Send the DA to the closing attorney. This could be the day before, 2 days before, but once we've got it, if I did mention it previously, requesting the DA, okay, has to be 3 to 10 days prior to closing, okay? So you can't ask the office for a disbursement authorization the day before closing. We don't have enough time to build the form, get it to the broker and get them to sign it. It's got to be in that 3 to 10 day before period. But I need to send the actual form, the disbursement authorization, to the closing attorney so they know what checks to write. And I need to pick up whatever earnest money I need to deliver to the closing table. I need to make a plan to remove my sign in my lockbox if I'm on the listing side. And keep in mind when we're planning that and scheduling that, that seller or that buyer may want to do a final walkthrough an hour before closing, okay? So I either need to make arrangements that they bring the lockbox with them to the closing table and give it to me, or leave a key for them to have access, or find out that they're not going to be going to the property and then I can safely bring it all and just give them the keys at the closing table. Okay. Then we have the closing. Closing is really simple. Show up, be there. There's nothing for you to do. Okay, there's not anything you have to sign. There's no reason for you to be there except for 2 things. One, to get the checks, okay? And you don't have to do that, okay? Because they will mail them to you or you can pick them up later, okay? But you have been on this journey with your client. Why would you not cross the finish line with them, okay? That's an emotional, buy side, sell side, doesn't matter. The closing table is a win, okay? I want to be there for the win, okay? I want to be able to snap that picture and have that promotion. I want to be able to shake their hand and congratulate them on the sale, congratulate them on the purchase. I want to build that relationship a little bit more. And so my job at the closing table is to be their entertainment, okay? Because understand, you may show up to the closing and you have to sit in the lobby for a half an hour. And then you're going to go back in the conference room and you're going to fill out paperwork for about 20 minutes. And then you may have to wait another 30 minutes, 40 minutes, an hour, while the lender verifies all the right signatures are in the right places before you get turned loose, okay? Well, that 30 minutes before and that 45 minutes after, those are really boring times for your client, okay? You want it to be an enjoyable experience. So be there to chat with them, engage with them, talk about what comes next for them. You want that relationship built, because as much as you want that check, you want a bunch of future checks. You want their next house sold, their next house bought, and you want all of their referrals. And this is just a great time to build that relationship. And then get the signed settlement statement and the checks, okay? Those are the two things that we need as a broker, okay? So after closing, you need to bring those back to the office, okay? If you did the DA, you got your check, you are more than welcome, go straight to the bank, deposit that, but we want to get paid too. So please bring us the settlement statement and the checks. You're required to have those to us within a day of closing, okay? So get that to us so we can handle our stuff, and know that the first of the month, or the last day of the month, we close the books and have to do a complete balancing of our accounting at the end of the month. So that's a big deal for us. We really want you guys to get those here, if at all possible, the last day of the month. If you close on the last day, get it here the last day to make sure we can move through that process really quickly. Then remove all of your sales posts from social media, okay? And what I mean for that is you're the listing agent and you put a post, you know, check out my new listing, okay? Open house this weekend, anything where you are promoting the sale of a house for sale needs to come down. Because guess what you don't have anymore? Don't have a house. And what else don't you have? Permission to market it. You no longer have a listing agreement, okay? That listing agreement terminated at the closing table. So you're in violation of correct rules if you're out there marketing a home for sale that you don't have an agreement to market for sale, okay? So all those past posts, we need to go take those down. Great time to mail thank you letters, okay? Mail thank you letters to your client. Mail thank you letters to the person on the other side of the transaction, okay? Update your database and put those other people in your database. So you're the seller, you represented the seller. Well, guess what you now know about the buyer? Their new address. Yeah, okay. And is it likely or unlikely that the other agent is going to stay in contact with them for the next 5 years? Unlikely. We may have a chance to adopt that abandoned client, okay, and be their agent the next time. We can adopt them and be the recipient of their referrals, okay? You've got a new contact for your database now, okay? And anybody else that you want to thank. Did the attorney do a great job? The lender do a great job? The inspector do a great job for you? Thank those people. This is a relationship business, so don't hesitate to send those out. And if the agent on the other side did a good job, thank them. Why might I want to build a relationship or continue a relationship with that other agent?
Because you may have another transaction down the road with them.
May have another transaction with them down the road, or I may want to see about finding a way to get them in my downline and be able to get profit share if Keller Williams is a good fit for them. So if we like them and like the way they did business, we'd love to have them here at Keller Williams. Make your follow-up calls. Definitely for your buyers, you know, call them the next day after closing. Make sure everything's okay with the house. There's not anything. Don't leave them feeling like you abandoned them, okay? And for your sellers, you may want to wait just a few days, see how they're doing. But we want to be following them. They've been talking to people about them buying a house. They've been talking to people about them selling their house. This is just a really good time. You just had a closing, okay? You just succeeded. You did everything they wanted you to. Great time to ask for referrals. All right, some things for you guys to keep in mind. That's it. At that point, we're done. But I wanted to kind of plant some seeds for you of things you should be thinking about throughout this whole process. And one of those is update your social media constantly. Tell your story. When you have a client, let other people know you have a client and what you're doing and what you're going on. You're out showing houses this afternoon. Take a picture of one of the neighborhoods you're going to go visit and say, had the best time today out showing houses with my client. Okay, in Lilburn, in Loganville, whatever it was. You want to take advantage to share your story and attract other people. You want to celebrate your successes. Okay, we got under contract. We throughout the whole step. Okay, constantly be looking back and making sure that any compliance issues got addressed. We didn't talk about it as we were going through, because hopefully when you turn in your documents, compliance says, yay, 2 thumbs up, everything looks good. But sometimes they're not. Sometimes you are going to have made a mistake. And so you need to be looking back in your command and making sure, have you gotten that green check mark that says, yes, everything looks good, okay? And revisit that and work to get those compliance issues cleared as early as possible. Next one. Check in with the lender and the attorney continually throughout the process. You ought to be talking to them every 4 or 5 days. And that may just be a little email. It might be a phone conversation, but you want to be front and center the moment something goes off the rails, okay? And be able to work to get things back on track. You don't want to find out something, you don't want to be 15 days into a contract and talking to the lender and finding out that the buyer hasn't turned in all their documents. It happens, okay? So don't let that happen to you though. And then communicate progress with your client. Because this is a checklist type thing that we're working through, and so much of the stuff we have to do, there's no reason for us to tell our client, we did it, it's done, we're on track. But that's one of the reasons people think that we're overpaid, is they have no idea all this stuff we do for them because we haven't communicated it with them, okay? And they're sitting back anxious and nervous, for you to call them and say, hey, just want to let you know I reached out to the attorney today. They've got everything that they need. We're on track. Talk to the lender. Everything looks like we're right where we're supposed to be. Everything's been turned into underwriting. Talk to the other agent. The seller's working on those repairs right now and expects that they're going to be done by Friday. What did I just do for my client? Put them completely at ease, okay? And I help them realize that even though we're not together and we're not out looking at houses, we're not doing whatever, what am I doing? I'm working for them, okay? So when I get that big check at the closing table, they think back to all the times that they've talked to me, all the things that I've done for them. I want them to look at that $10,000 or $15,000 check and think, man, Trey earned every bit of that, okay? If I never tell them what I did for them, they'll think my job was easy and I was overpaid, okay? And trust me, I'm not. I need to make double. So, all right. Another thing I want to mention before I let you guys go, we're going to wrap up here in just a second. Be thinking about leverage, okay? So much of this stuff that we just went over, do you have to be a really skilled agent to do? No, okay? But it all has to be done. And so some different ways to think about leverage. When we talk about leverage, leverage is either a system, a tool, or a person, okay? That's what we mean when we talk about leverage. And so starting with systems, okay, and I encourage you guys to have a system, and I've created one for you, for those that are in the coaching program. In the resource folder under checklist, I have a buyer's checklist and a seller's checklist that walk you through it. And that's the whole checklist. Everything in yellow, that was the contract to close, okay? On the buyers, 3 pages, or sellers, 3 pages, but everything in the yellow, that's the contract to close stuff. Print a copy of this out, stick it in the folder for each transaction, and mark stuff out as you go. And these are customized for the buy side, customized for the sell side. And you guys can go through and edit this, because you may have some personal things you want to do, some personal touches that you want to utilize. You also have the option, and instead of having a checklist here, a printed checklist, Command lets you do task lists, okay? And as you're moving people through your opportunities, you can set it up so that at each stage, you have a new task list that has to be done. And that way you don't have to have a printed copy. Everything you need to do is right there in Command. So you might want to go investigate, how do I create task lists? How do I manage those? Because once you set that up one time, that task list will be there for every opportunity in that stage. And then lastly, you get so busy that you struggle managing this stuff, hire somebody, okay? And that can be a virtual assistant. That could be a third-party company. Like we have here, we offer contract close services as an office, but you may want your own VA or you may want a full-time assistant. A lot of these tasks are things that you can hand off to someone. Now, your assistant, your VA, your transaction coordinator that you hire, they can't write your amendment to address concerns for you. They can't write your amendment to sales price. They can't negotiate those things for you, but can they schedule your closing?
Yes.
Can they load your documents? Can they make sure that everything's through compliance? Can they request your DA and get the earnest money check? All of that sort of stuff they can do. And that frees up your time to go spend more time face-to-face with potential clients and work on building your business. Okay. And guys, that's it for me today. So, does anybody have any, was this helpful?
Yes.
Good stuff?
Yes, I have a question.
Sure, Erica.
So I'm working with as you know, a buyer that is doing cash, and I know that Mina and I spoke about the inspection, but he refused to do inspection, and I must, or the appraisal. He is offering.
And that's his decision. If
So it
he's
is
comfortable with that risk, that is perfectly okay.
Okay, so they don't have to get an appraisal, and they don't have to and they can refuse the inspection, because he said, I already inspected the place.
Yeah, if it's
I wanted the offer.
If it is cash, and understand, we talk about the purpose of due diligence is to do whatever inspections the buyer needs to be comfortable moving forward. So that could be that I have my cousin Billy Bob come look at the house, okay? That's one inspection, right? I could have my contractor come look at the house because I know that I'm gonna need to put new flooring in and I'm gonna have to do some painting, and I'm more concerned about what's that gonna cost than I am somebody checking the AC unit, the thermostat. That's a personal decision that they make for risk. So it may be them themselves, it may be somebody else, or they may hire a professional inspector. Whatever they need to do to be confident moving forward, that's what we're there to help make sure it's done. Okay. So he didn't want a professional inspector. That's perfectly okay. He saw what he needed to with his own eyes. He's happy. We're happy for him. Okay. That risk is now on him.
Now, does this apply only to cash buyers? Or
no.
So any buyer,
whatever inspections they want. Now, as far as the appraisal goes, on a finance buyer, it's the finance company, it's the mortgage lender that requires the appraisal. So you don't have the option as a buyer. If I'm taking out a loan with Wells Fargo, Quicken Loans, Supreme Lending, doesn't matter who it is, they're not going to loan me the money without an appraisal. I don't have the option to waive it. It's only because I'm paying cash and it's my money and my risk that I don't have to have an appraisal.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Did anybody else have any questions I can answer? All right. Well, guys, thank you for your attention today. Glad you guys got value out of it. And if there's anything I can do to help you, call me, text me, email me. See you guys soon.
Bye.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you